Hello, my name is Bruce Zawalski. I'm Chief Instructor at the Boreal Wilderness Institute and author of Canadian Wilderness Survival. And today I want to talk about another fire lighting tool. And that tool is the striker, or sometimes called the flint striker, sometimes the zirconium striker, or more properly a ferrocium striker. But we'll talk about that. This is my backup tool. So as you've seen in other videos, the first thing I use is my lighter. I use my lighter until it stops working. Then I use my matches. My matches are my backup to my lighter. This, the striker, is the backup to them. It's the third tool I'm going to use. And why I use it is that tool will work in the wet, it'll work in extreme cold, as long as I have some kind of tinder to light. Functionally, it isn't a flint and steel. As a matter of fact, these, when I was a child, I was told this was a flint and steel, but this actually isn't flint. And we do still have some flint tools that are really flint, but a lot of them actually aren't flint. And that happens because in the 1800s, when the British were busy industrializing Britain, as the Industrial Revolution went into full swing, they were building bigger and bigger steam engines. And as they built bigger steam engines, they wanted to be able to light them with a striker. So they asked for bigger and bigger pieces of flint from the flint mill. Unfortunately, flint is very brittle. So we get small pieces of flint. You think of a rifle as a flintlock. What was the great complaint of all the soldiers? That the flints would break, the flints would fall off, and they would be charged, and they would lose all their pay. It was a kind of a sad situation. Well, this is called a flint and steel, but it isn't flint. And so what it actually is ferrocium, which is an alloy. Now, originally it was zirconium. So zirconium was what the British found to replace flint. And they made their, and zirconium is a rare earth metal. They originally found it, I believe, in Indonesia, and then they would have been in a few other places. But it's mined. So they mine this zirconium, and then they use that. And we use that from sometime in the 1800s, certainly by the 1850s, 1860s, all the way into what we would think of as the modern age in terms of survival in the 1970s and 80s. And at that point, it started to disappear. And it started to disappear because the price of that rare earth metal went up. Well, that's life. So what happened was, for a while, they were very rare and hard to find. And then someone invented an alloy, and that alloy is ferrocium. And ferrocium is aluminum, iron ore, and about 10 other metals in small quantities. And you can look it up on Wikipedia if you really care what it amounts to, if you want to make your own or something. There it is. Now, what happens with that is, this is effectively a ferrocium striker, but we call it a flint and steel. And what happens is, and I lit my first fire in 1974, 1975 on the side of Abraham Lake with tinder and a striker, with this kind of striker. And you get a little bit of a spark and not a great spark. And I like this as the challenge round for my students to say, hey, if you can light it this way, you begin to learn to manipulate tinder well enough. But I wouldn't trust this when I went to the woods. We also have other small strikers like this. And that'll give you a little bit better spark when it's new, and then it'll wear out pretty quickly. It doesn't really have a lot of metal, so it wears out. That's just how life works. Working way up, people suddenly discovered you could put in, because it's just cheap metals, you can actually put it in a rod. And what happens here is, this was the original type of steel that we put with it. And it really is just a chunk of an old hacksaw blade. I mean, this is manufactured hacksaw, but no one really knew, because the first people did is just broke hacksaw blades off, drilled holes in them, attached them, and you get that. What's the problem with this jagged edge? This jagged edge is really bad for it, and it's ripping this striker apart. And I'm probably losing 2 or 3 times the amount of metal on it, and I'm not getting better sparks. Along the way, cheaper strikers give you cheaper ends, and this is the same thing here. I can hardly get a strike out of the thing, but it's because it's a cheap piece of metal. Now, the Swedes, being a little bit smarter in terms of survival gear, started to build better strikers. And they built better strikers by doing 2 things. This is the first generation of Light My Fire that I ever worked with. and it's got a little bit of a thumb piece so you can hold it well, and a jagged edge here still, but a sharper metal edge that you can work your way down, right? So this is all right. Along the way, they flatten the edge out. As soon as they flatten the edge out, they double the sparks, right? No problem at all. Now, this is still a small striker. This is what they call their Scout. And in the next generation up, they did a couple of things. They produced a bigger one, of course, the Army, what is it called, the Army one. I like this because I like the extra sparks. Now, if everything's good and everything's in a nice day and it's all perfect, I can do that, no problem at all. But what I discovered was when it got to be 40 below and 45 below, and I was out in the middle of Nowheresville, I wanted to have this. And so that's one of the things that I've changed. You know, Morse Kohansky always said, the more you know, the less you carry. But he never actually said the more you know, the lighter your gear is. It didn't work that way. And this is one of those examples where, like my knife is a little heavier than the knife I used to carry. My striker is the same thing. I've decided I need that extra weight because when things are bad, I want extra sparks. I just want to produce that weight of spark to make sure it lights. Here, though, they've done a couple of things. Number one is real thumb holes. Now, where does this make a difference? This makes a difference when you're not as strong. So if you're a smaller individual, you got smaller hands, you can produce the same sparks as somebody who's really big and heavy. And so this is the problem. We see these guys, and they're firing all these sparks out, and it's really, really powerful sparks because they're really muscular. Here, you can do it. And so what they do is they've sharpened the edge here very well, and it's a straight, sharp edge. So you can do the same thing by grinding the edge of your Scandi blade knife on top to get that edge to it. So you can do that as a multi-purpose tool, or you can carry one. Same thing. Does not matter which one you do. Second one is, there's the flat surface. Now, that flat surface started like which is with paint on it. What happens with this paint stops the ferrocerium alloy from oxidizing, which it'll do. So it'll look ugly in the package and you won't want to buy it. So they paint it. So the first thing you have to do is figure out where you're scraping and scrape the paint off. And then you need to flatten it out. So this one is just barely beginning to flatten. And as I flatten it more and more, it will become a better and better striker. So the striker I take to the field right now that's around the neck on my knife, that is way better sparks than this one here, which is just sitting in the classroom. And as I spark, though, I will get far, far better sparks. If I can go down and keep it at an angle, take it at a 45-degree angle and go and put the striker at a 70 to 80-degree angle, what you'll have is 5 or 10 times the sparks. And as I go down, that way it will go. Now, when you're using a striker, you can actually pick your direction. You can either go this way down or pull the striker back, whichever one you're most comfortable with. I practice with both, just simply so I have that option. The third option you have is attaching this to something. If you have some way to clamp this in, you can just run those edges down. The striker won't go anywhere, and it'll be more secure depending on what kind of tinder you're using and how fluffy or airborne that tinder may go with a little bit of air, right? And so a little bit of wind or something, or the air of just the striker going down. One of the disadvantages of the way I do it most, which is going down this way, is the very end of that striker won't get much wear. But I've just learned to stop there, and what will happen is over time, you'll end up with this, right? Now, unfortunately, people use both sides of this striker in the field, and so now it's wearing out. Had it been only one side, to where these are, they actually last longer. As you work your way down, you can go to about 3/4 of the way through before you'll ever break it. And as it becomes very thin, what I've learned to do is just put a little less force on the striker, and you won't bust it, and it'll last longer. So these strikers work really, really well, and they'll work there. To do them, though, you're going to need some kind of tinder. So whether that is a piece of tinder like this, which is a chunk of wax, kerosene, and a cotton ball, and I've got an article online if you want to read about this, and just go to boreal.net, read the article, and or something like this, which is just cheap cotton tinder, and that's of course aircraft safe, or moving up in the world to something like this, which is a true tinder fungus, assuming you can find it. So the first type of tinder I want to use is this tinder here, which is cotton, batten, wax, and kerosene. And again, to make this work, I need to be at a 45-degree angle here and then go down at a 90-degree angle. And there it is. Perfect. And that took no time at all to light up. Second kind of tinder is not as good. This is cotton tinder. And to make it work, I shred it open. And again, same thing. 90-degree angle here and straight down into there. And there it is. So that took me 2 strikes to get it right, but you'll notice again a big flame. Birch bark. And if you're not using birch bark, the other option you actually have is dry grass. Dry grass takes a little bit more time. If you get good with the striker, you have to practice and do it in the field. And don't just take this striker in its package and go to the field and expect it to save your life. The only way you can do it is practice, go out and actually use it. All right, so I hope you learned something today about strikers. Strikers are my backup method of fire lighting. So I carry a lighter. I use it. It'll eventually stop working or it'll get too cold. No problem. I'm on to my strike anywhere matches in a waterproof container. Once those are used up, or to save those for, again, even poorer conditions, I'll go immediately to my striker. So this is why I'm training in the field. After people learn to use their lighters and matches on the first day, we're straight on to strikers, and we're lighting every single fire for, 4 or 5 days using those strikers, because that's what it makes a difference. So again, thank you. Hope you learned something. Please follow my channel. Please go on to Facebook or Twitter and follow the Boreal Wilderness Institute or myself. And I appreciate that. I hope you learned something and you have a chance to watch some of the more videos on this channel. Thank you.